big topic today. We're talking about MAID in Canada. That's the title of this. And if you aren't aware of what it is, our guest right now will talk about it, Rose. Okay, so just give me a little bit of a background of who you are, your situation, and what's brought you to what we're going to speak about in a minute.
Well, I became a quadriplegic at the age of 16, almost 17. I fell into a swimming pool, suffered a C5-6 spinal cord injury, and I've been a full-time wheelchair user since then. For 17 years, I have been financially independent from the government. I am a single mom with 3 kids, and I've never really needed to, thank you, to access the social supports that are supposed to be available to Canadians. And so recently I experienced something that was quite traumatic, and it's just kind of spiraled my life out of control. And I, for the first time, have had to try and access social supports and disability support programs. And what I found is that the wait time for these programs and to receive, financial support from the government for having a disability, it takes 6 to 8 months. Subsequently, it's only 91 days to choose medical assistance in dying.
I think we have to say unaliving or we'll get banned, which is another thing too. You can't even say it's crazy. Okay. But I mean, that's what's happening, right? And so, what caught my attention was you were on TikTok live and you were talking about your situation, and there's people on there being like, no, don't, we don't want, people all want you to live, obviously, and you want to live, and probably a lot of people in your situation want to live, but it's the lack of support makes it really hard, if not possible, to do so. Is that correct?
Well, and I mean, in going through this whole process, it has brought a lot of things to light that I wasn't even aware of that were happening within my own community. And so, I mean, it's not a secret that our government support programs are a pittance of what's required to live. During the pandemic, we decided that minimum each Canadian needs $2,000 to live. Well, how is that making any sense when there's people in Ontario only receiving a maximum of $1,300 a month in support? And those numbers haven't changed since the pandemic, which is like kind of a bigger slap in the face too, because during the pandemic, you think people with high needs, life got a lot more expensive. Mm-hmm. I know everyone's cost of living went up, but think about people who need extras. Their cost of living went up extra.
So not just that. So let me just think, like, from a mom's perspective, first of all, you're in a wheelchair, you're in the pandemic, people that having to get groceries, all those things, all those services that were just, easy to get before for people who were able-bodied were difficult for even them. And now you're a single mom with 3 kids. So how was that how did you get through that?
Well, the first year or two of the pandemic, I would say, was really awesome. Like, people were willing to help, right? Everyone's getting that CERB money. They're like, cool, I got all this time on my hands, a little bit of a cushion, everything's kosher. So people were a lot more willing to help. But the last 2 years now, for sure, year and a half, 2 years, since then, there's been a real downturn in humanity. And that's even pre-pandemic. Like, we're stooping to new lows of low. And that's what's kind of concerning me the most, especially being a mother, raising 2 children with disabilities. I don't ever want my kids to be in a position where they need support and they're asking for assistance, and instead they're offered to not be here anymore.
Yeah, well, my mother-in-law just went through with her sister. Her sister chose that route. She had really bad cancer, and so they were able to live stream it, and she was able to say goodbye to her sister on camera. It's such a hard one because there are certain cases and things where people should have the right to their own decisions in life, but it shouldn't be because your basic needs can't be met. I believe
exactly.
I'm a strong advocate for housing, and people should get clean water, housing, nutritious food to eat, and access to all that. Those 3 basic needs could be met. But that's not happening. And rentals and the pricing of housing is increased so much. So how do you survive on a daily basis?
With the help of friends, which is dwindling right now. My issue in general, I mean, and so yes, I've applied for government assistance. Do I actually want it? Not really. I want to be able to relocate to an area where I can get more reliable support, which is my main issue. Where I live in suburbia, it's kind of like the dead zone for services. And so it's been a struggle for as long as I've lived here, which is pretty much the better part of the last 17 years. With some exceptions, I've moved around a little bit, but this has kind of always been home base. And now, post pandemic, with this like downturn in humanity, it's intolerable, it's unbearable. The area is very ableist. And as someone who's done disability rights advocacy and accessibility consulting professionally, it's just there's not a lot of room for growth here because smaller community, less funding. I get it. But then the flip side of that is that all of the supports are in a metro city center area where the cost of living is much higher.
Right.
Granted, all of that aside, I'm not looking to compare apples to oranges. That's a fight for another day. My main concern is getting me and my kids somewhere where we can stabilize so I can continue this fight because there is so much here left to unpack. And the thing about this whole going public is that the most profound thing for me is how many people in my comment section are like, yep, totally relatable, in the same boat. I'm scared, I'm this. And it's just like, it's time disabled people had a voice and they weren't silenced. And fortunately, because I think as a society we need to band together, but unfortunately, because I don't think we're getting the support that we need, but we need able-bodied allies. I don't think that we can make this change on our own, just the disabled community alone.
Right. So I want to talk about the ableist comment you made earlier and some examples of what that is and how you think that the able-bodied can come together with people that are struggling to advocate for this.
I've run into this situation several times since being a quadriplegic. And when I get close to someone, I form a close bond with them. And all of a sudden they start going out and noticing all the ways the world is inaccessible. So, for instance, you go to a store and you're like, cool, they don't have an automatic button. Or they have an automatic door opener and it's off all the time. That one's real classic. And while these seem like little things, like, oh, I just forgot to flick it on that day, or, like we're being left out, we're not being considered. I get it that it's a small thing to some, but to us, it's like I've had meltdowns over not having accessible doors where it's like, why? Like, by not having an automatic door, you're telling me that you don't want me to come in.
Mm-hmm.
And that is so hurtful. And, you know, I lived 17 years of my life being a privileged white girl, for lack of a better term. And then I became disabled, and that privilege was snatched. Yes, I'm still white,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm now part of a minority that isn't heard. Literally, just because I'm in a wheelchair, I've gone to the post office and I went with a friend because I don't drive. Friend also needed to mail some things. So we get up to the counter and friend goes, oh no, I gotta run up to the car, gotta grab my phone. Don't have the address to mail my package to. So friend heads out behind me. The lady at the counter looks over me, yells to the front, hey, I might need her to sign some things. And I was like, hey, hi, right here. You
No,
know?
no.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, you've been able to go see life through two different lenses, like people who are obese in life, and then they experience it when they've lost a lot of weight, and then they have that skinny privilege, and they see how differently you're treated. So you've kind of had that same thing, but different. And so, what other things do you notice that people do that they didn't do to you when you were before your accident?
You would be shocked how many people think it is appropriate to approach me in public and say things like, "You got a license for that thing?" Or "How fast does this thing go?" Or "You want to race?" Like literally, like, and I mean, I get it. Okay, cool. So you're uncomfortable with my disability, so you make a really awkward attempt at like an inroad, but like, how about we all just get comfortable with disability? Like, disabled bodies exist. Cool. The problem here is that there was such thing as the ugly laws that were only abolished, I think, in the 70s and 80s. And the mentality is still very much the same. We hide our disabled people away.
Mm-hmm.
And so people are not comfortable. And then, you have me and I go out into the world. Okay, cool. They're uncomfortable with my disability, but they're curious because they can't figure out, like, well, she's, pretty and looks normal, but she's in a wheelchair. And they, like, you can see people's thought process on their face. And it's just like, oh man, we need help. Like, this is
When it's taught is
what is
learned
going
too.
on.
So, I do think it's so important to educate parents on how to speak to their kids about people who have disabilities and how to talk about them, because I know kids are very curious. So what are some tips for you for parents when you have your kids in public, and some ways that kids can be curious but still polite?
So speaking to the youth is something that I am a strong advocate for, because I think that's the only way we're going to make change is if we start influencing younger generations.
Hmm.
And so I will often, so it's one of two things. So in a store, you'll get a child who's curious and a parent who, is open to that. But a lot of times you'll see a child who's curious and you'll see a parent like, shh, shh, stop looking.
Horrified.
Or just
Worry
like
what what they're going to say. They just
right,
I'm a mom.
right.
I'm always scared about what my kids are going to say to people, like.
Well, and that's where like I open the door. I'm a mom too, I'm very open to questions, and I usually, I'll talk to them about like, yeah, when I was your age, I could walk and I could skip and I could jump and I could do all the things. And then when I was a teenager, I made some choices that probably weren't very smart, and I wasn't playing safely around a pool, and I had an injury. And so, I'd like to reemphasize like pool safety is important.
Mhm.
Um, things like that. It's a teaching opportunity. Every moment is a teaching opportunity. And I think even with this whole situation I'm in right now, it's a learning opportunity for a lot of Canadians, because so many people think that the government takes care of the disabled community. And so many people believe that the social supports that they're paying into will be there one day if they need them.
And they're learning that that's not true. Now let's talk about your kids for a second. How have your kids navigated and how have you navigated parenting through your disability?
Well, and so a lot of people ask me this, like, what was, pregnancy like in a wheelchair? I
I
don't
I,
have
I stalked your whole TikTok, so I saw some of the common things people ask, where you said, how does it feel like being pregnant in a wheelchair, and all those different questions.
and I don't have any prior experience to compare it to. So and neither do my kids. And I think that's the blessing in it as well, is I mean, sure, they see their peers, but my kids aren't one to compare their lives to the lives of anyone else. I think partially too because they've grown up with their own disabilities as well. We've just kind of accepted that we're different, and we kind of just roll with it and rock with it. Um, but one thing about my kids for sure is they are far more independent and have advanced life skills than most kids their age, because they've had to. And, even at 6 and 8, like, I'm teaching them how to cook in the kitchen, and, how to cut things up, and how to, and things like that. Whereas, kids their age at their school are not doing those things.
They can't even do their own quote.
Exactly,
No.
exactly. And so my kids have just kind of in a way been forced into like, all right, cool, you're gonna have to do this. But for me, the balance is in, when I can, if I have assistance or if I can do something, I spoil them in certain ways to keep it fair, to keep it even. Wherever I can meet them halfway or go all the way for them, I do, and vice versa. We are very much a little team, and we've run into some little crises. For instance, last week, my middle son sliced his finger open because he decided to peel a carrot with a knife instead of finding the carrot peeler. And it wasn't a bad slice, but he's got ADHD. He's very sensitive. He is 0 to 60 in no time flat. And we got it together. We got the bleeding to stop. We got a bandage on it. We actually ran out of fabric bandages, and my little guy had to go ask a neighbor for one. Like we roll with it. However it needs to get done. At the end of the day, they're safe, they're loved, they're fed, we're all in it together kind of thing. And they wouldn't have it any other way. I am very much their safe space, and they have a father. They are always welcome to go live at dad's house. They don't want to. They want to be with me. And so
Testament to who
I
you
think,
are as a person, for sure.
well, and I think so too, right? Because obviously the lifestyle here is more involved. There's more work to be done, but they're willing to put in the work to be a part of the family unit here.
There's more love in that too, though, because it's, so many parents are distracted on their phones and doing all these different things when, our kids, like I started homeschooling my kids, and I've noticed a huge difference in their skills and the things they're able to do because we just make them do it. My kids making eggs and making their own meals and stuff like that. Like, I think it's very important to teach kids real life skills,
Well, exactly. I mean, here we are, a lot of us grown adults, and it's like, okay, we got all these life skills, but like, how many of us can emotionally regulate?
Don't teach that in school.
Like, they don't teach that in school. And so say like with my kids where it's like, they're good. I'm reinforcing that self-awareness. So it's like, if you're tapped out, you know what I mean? Like, you've had a rough week, it's Friday, and you just can't do another day in that madhouse, stay home. Take a mental health day. Cool.
Yeah.
I would rather have kids who know their limits.
Mm-hmm.
I like, and same, my kids have a rebellious streak. Go figure. Don't know where they get that from.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not, yes, okay. Is it frustrating that I'm getting calls from the school? Yes, it is. But I am happier that I have children who are willing to question it rather than just follow.
Mm-hmm. You're raising leaders.
That's what we need more of. And, like I said, it goes back to creating change in the youth. So if my contribution to the world is that I raise two little kids who have empathy and understanding in spades, I've done my job.
Mm-hmm. Well, emotional intelligence is so important, and it is completely, well, up until my schooling, at least, I'm 40. We didn't learn anything about emotional intelligence in school and how to handle conflict and how to work things out, and people are so really tough behind their little screens, but there's not a lot of this. So it's good to raise kids that can communicate effectively and know their boundaries and know their worth. So good job. It's not an easy job. Now, have you ever spoken at schools?
I have. Typically, though, my speeches at the school are to the teachers, and it's just me doing in-services about diabetes. As far as like speaking about my life, and my experience, no, not yet. I haven't.
TED Talk. You should look into doing like some kind of a TED Talk. I think it would be really powerful, and using your voice. Because the other day I did a podcast with two of my friends who are in the LGBTQIA community, and I was talking to them because one of the biggest questions that comes up for people is, why are we giving so much attention to this community but ignoring other communities? And it's a hard question to ask people in the community. We're having all these, so much support system for them out in the world. And people were asking online things like, okay, so should we shut the lights off in a bathroom and let everyone feel like what it's like to be blind? Should we, all these different things? And it's kind of one of those things that you have to really think about. But what my friend said was, there needs to be somebody in those communities who rises up and stands up for their cause, because everybody needs a spokesperson and people who are willing to fight those battles. So just because we get something doesn't mean they can't. Like, there's enough room for everybody. You just need more people speaking up in the different communities.
To be honest, I think a lot of that is influenced by the government and their own agendas.
Don't get me started on that.
So, I mean, there's that.
Yeah.
But I have a friend that I have within the trans community that I have been able to be very open and transparent with. And it's been a really good learning opportunity for both of us, because so he's expressed to me like, well, the trans community, like, we're hated by our own parents, and we're disowned by our families. And I said, so are the disabled, because we're different from our family of origin too. You know what I mean? So, like, people of color, it's rare that you're gonna see a Black mom go, nah, just don't want to talk to my kid because they're Black. You know what I mean? Because we're all Black together. Whereas being gay, trans, any of those, you are setting yourself apart from your family of origin. But it is the exact same with the disabled community. And we are disabled people are every day. Disabled people are abused. Disabled people are disowned. Like, all of it, we experience that. We are at risk as well, if not more so, because we're vulnerable. There are nonverbal people being abused daily, and they can't speak to that.
Right.
So it's there's a lot of similarities, and I think a lot of the other minority communities kind of overlook that. And then the other part that really kind of sinks in for me is the disability. Like, disability is the only one that can cross all of them. Yeah. You can be Black, gay, and disabled. Like, you can be disability can go knock on anyone's door, and no one is immune to disability. You don't know. You can be able-bodied today, tomorrow, not the case.
Well, and the thing is the caregiving too. So depending on the level of disability. So, for example, I took in my husband's grandmother when she was 96, and she was she couldn't walk. So I had to carry her in the car, and I had to, like, I burnt out in a way that I can't even, like, that caregiver burnout. And then you start getting kind of mean. I'd be like, Omi, like, she'd be yelling all day, like, mommy, help me, help me, help me, help, 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 in her German accent for like an hour. And I'd be like, what do you want? And she's like, get me a coffee. Like, and so I'd be like, Omi, I'm going to kill you. And she's like, do it, do it. But I feel like we had this very, like, dark humor back and forth. But I was making a joke in a dark place because I was so exhausted. I was taking care of 2 kids in diapers. She was in diapers. I was having to bathe her and do all these things. So, people don't also factor in that a lot of people who have caregivers who are disabled are being abused because of how burnt out the people caring for them are. And that's in care homes. I saw so much abuse in the care homes where we put Omi finally. I saw just short-tempered, the way people treat them.
Oh, yeah.
Was disgusting. The elderly is a huge, I'm a huge advocate for that. But at the same time, being in the shoes of a caregiver, I could see, if I was doing this for a very long time, I can see how you lose your patience, and you almost start to dehumanize the people that you're caring for, because they're just another patient. And we'd have like 50 people coming through our house, washing her, not thinking for once about if she had any history of sexual abuse or anything where she doesn't like men touching her. There'd be males coming in, women. And she felt so violated and vulnerable. So I finally had to fire all the extra help we got from the government. And I just did it all myself, because I'm like, she deserves her dignity, And I feel like that's another thing that people don't think about with people in any kind of the disability community, is you're not treated very nice, depending on the level.
No, and so that's actually been something that I've always been very particular about. Just because I'm disabled does not mean that I'm going to have to be spending my time around people that I don't like or that don't inspire me or that like bring me down. I refuse. That is not a quality of life.
Mhm.
And that's kind of, I guess, why I've found myself in the situation that I have is because I'm not willing to hire government agency care where they send whoever they have that day. My care is very, I don't want to say specialized, but I do it a certain way. And if it's not done a certain way, it puts me at risk. I get sick, not about it.
Mhm.
So, yep, I would rather have nothing than have something that's going to make me sick.
And I feel like people
So,
always think, oh, you should settle for the help you get. And no, you have a right to get that help that you need, the help the way you want it, and to have the dignity in that help. And people are forgetting that. Same with the homeless community. They're like, someone just hands somebody a sandwich, and the homeless person's like, I don't want that sandwich. Like, I have a right to what I want to eat. And it's like we just think, oh well, here you go, here's your help. But is it the help
yeah.
is it the help you want, or is it the help the government thinks you need? You know what I mean?
Well, and that one's kind of a loaded topic for me because I feel like if more disabled people were given the assistance that they need or the assistance that is in their best interest, the disabled community could be doing a whole lot better.
So what does it look like? So in terms of like best case scenario across Canada, what does it look like for people on all spectrums of like the disability? Like what kind of supports would be helpful and what kind of education would be helpful?
Hmm, that's that's a big one. Well, for instance, Canada doesn't have federal disability laws. The US has had them for more than 30 years. We are more than 30 years behind the United States in
And what are those
disability
laws?
rights. Just so disabled people cannot be discriminated against. Like things have to be accessible, or you're at risk of a lawsuit. Like you have to be like people can't be abusive, or you can be protected. People can't be um like discriminatory, like things like that. Where ableism is a crime that you can actually take legal action against in the United States. Here in Canada, nope. We have in Ontario, we have the AODA and the Accessibility Ontario, whatever. It is supposed to be implemented. Ontario is supposed to be fully accessible by 2025. We are so far from that, so far from that. It's a joke. And I feel like, again, just that was government policy that kind of got spewed out to appease people
Mm-hmm.
to make them be quiet. But the government hasn't followed through on it. So, you know, just another way that disabled people have been told, you don't really matter.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me a bit of how the government has treated our First Nations people. You know, a lot of the reserves that don't have clean drinking water still in 2023. It blows my mind, and it's just all this funding going to other places, other countries. And you're like, well, why can't we take care of our own backyard first and the people who need help in our backyard? So I was a bit critical about how much money was sent to Ukraine and things like that, because I see people in these communities and in your community and the even the homeless community and the First Nations communities all really, really struggling, and the government making all these empty promises and never any follow through. It's very disappointing.
No, and so there's another bill before Senate, right? Is it Senate or is it Commons? I don't know where it is. But it is for it's where is it in the reading process? I was just researching it the other day. Anyways, it's for basically a top-up benefit to help disabled Canadians live above the poverty line. So it's supposed to kind of take us from down here to who knows where, because like the cost of living is crazy. But there's so many issues with government assistance, and so one of the things that I learned in this process is that it's typically faster to get on Ontario disability support if you apply for Ontario Works first. Ontario Works is like basic income welfare supports, more or less. And I have a hair that is tickling
Get
my nose,
it? Get it?
and I don't know where it is, and I can't find it. Anyways, I'm going to ignore it. And so, in order to get onto Ontario Works, I would have had to forfeit my life insurance policies and that of my children as well for the cash out value, which is like less than $10,000. Those policies are my children's inheritance. And if they were purchased before I became disabled and before they became disabled. If I were to cash those in, we would never get life insurance again. My children would never have an inheritance.
That's
And
crazy.
it's like, and so the flip side of that is that you only have to forfeit those assets if you're going on Ontario Works, which is like immediate financial aid. They would just give it to you kind of thing. But if you wait the 6 to 8 months on the Ontario Disability Support Program, there's more room for assets. You wouldn't have to give up those assets if you wait the 6 to 8 months. Some people are not in a position to wait 6 to 8 months without any income.
Don't you feel like
So
people that are passing legislation and stuff and different, like, providing supports? I feel like a person who's disabled should be the one making I feel like that would make the most sense, because it's like a parent giving parenting advice to, or so, a non-parent giving someone parenting advice. You're putting programs and stuff in place when you have absolutely no idea the daily struggles and the daily needs that aren't being met, right? When you don't have proper programs in place. So maybe that's something that you can.
that one is one that I don't understand and will irk me until forever. Disabled voices are not being heard. We're not at the table. We're not included in these discussions. It's we're not represented in politics.
Well, it's like the lady at the
Period.
post office. That lady at the post office is exactly what's happening. It's like, excuse me, can like, when you can
What
see
it, what
it
it,
for
what
yourself.
is it? What do these people need? Yeah, they're going to the people who are quote unquote taking care of us, overseeing us, whatever, which is like literally no one takes care. I take care of me.
Yeah,
I hire people to be my hands and they do what I tell them to do, what I would do for myself.
yeah,
No one is taking care of me. No one has to think of all the things that I need to do. I still have to do that.
yeah.
And same with my kids, right? We talk about caregiver burnout, but I wrote an article called The Wall, which was kind of like the beginning of all of this, and it talks about disability burnout because as a disabled person, my managing my disabled life is more than 40 hours a week.
Oh yeah, I can
Just
imagine.
so okay, there's a full-time job, plus I have a full-time job, plus I'm looking after two disabled children. One of them I'm literally acting as one of his organs all day. Like when do I sleep? Never, never.
Yeah, I honestly do. I know people hate when they say, I don't know how you do it. You're a superhero, like all those things. Like, but it's true. Like I honestly, as a mom, I've got three boys and a girl, and it's hard. Like the level of burnout, being completely able-bodied. I can't actually wrap my head around how on a day-to-day basis you can do that. And I just give you so many props, because and to look as good as you do too. Like you look like you are, I mean, on your TikToks too, like you look like you take regular showers. Like, I mean, I'm like, I'm a mom. I'm like, well, how is she doing this? Like, you know what I mean? Like it's really amazing. So I do think that there needs to be more people like you out there speaking up and being a voice. And going back to the education part, we talked about some of the things that should be in place. Like as I'm learning, this is part of the education, I'm learning about like beach access and like just general access to stores and schools, and even when you go to people's houses, like, oh, there's stairs, perfect. And going back to the grocery too, is like to get to the grocery store and then to have to get everything out and then to get to the door and then the doors aren't working, you know, having so much barriers coming at you constantly, and then red tape. And I know with any kind of programs, the paperwork and all the stuff that goes with that, it's like, it's so much, you know.
And that's the thing, is even doing, you know, getting these government supports or seeking programs is a full-time job in and of itself. Like, I don't know, there's no way that I would be able to work and even just advocate for my kids the way that I am right now. It's crazy. It's a lot. I don't know how I do it on a good day, but I feel like, well, my disability never really made sense to me until I had kids, and now that my kids have challenges, it's like, okay, fine, I guess this was my mission, is to teach these two sweet little humans how to live different, or live in a world that wasn't built for them, and while at the same time hopefully making the world more inclusive. You know, we talk about accessibility, grocery stores, stuff like that. And something that's a little bit of a soft spot for me, is that the fact that the pandemic made life a whole lot more accessible. All of a sudden, work from home opportunities, plentiful. Grocery store pickup, plentiful. Delivery services, plentiful. All of these things, all of this infrastructure that would have been amazing for the disabled community to have years prior.
Years ago.
But
yeah.
right. But it didn't make you, it wasn't profitable enough for you then. So it wasn't, you know, a smart investment. But now that it affects everybody, now you want to invest in it. Like, that sent a very, like, tell us we're not as important without telling us we're not as important.
Well, and how fast
You
they
know?
did it too. Like how fast were we able to get, you know, the out to the entire world, but we can't get out clean water, or we can't get out certain medicines and things like that to people. But we sure got that out fast because look at the money behind it, right? And it all goes back to like what, you know, what's profitable.
Well, and I've heard, you know, I've seen it commented on a lot of my videos as well, as, you know, people are like, well, where are we going to get the money for that? And it's like, where did we get the money to give everyone $2,000 a month for how long? Where did we get the money to do all this COVID emergency, set up extra hospitals, this, that? Like, where did that money come from?
Even just the grocery stores, everyone getting the plastic screens and the little circles that you got to walk on. And I mean, that came so fast.
But you bet all of those corporate conglomerates got kickbacks from the government for doing that.
Oh, 100% they did. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
You know, it's a tough one for me, because it's like, okay, you can do it, you just choose not to. Cool, that's your prerogative. But what I've noticed also is, now that we're, you know, out of the pandemic, they're taking some of that stuff away. Like,
and they're trying to give you MAID. And that goes back to, it's like, you know, we can't afford to do this. So here's an option for you. And you know, what an awful thing that you, instead of getting support, the government's saying, well, here you go, just here's some paper you can fill out and we can help unalive you. Like, that's the response.
One of the things that really kind of like gets to me is the fact that I haven't been a part of this system. Like, I'm a newcomer to it. There are people that have been beaten down by this system for a very, very long time. They've voiced their concerns, they've tried to be heard, and now it's like, now they're just being like, hey, here's a consolation prize, we'll offer you MAID. And it's like, yeah, no, like, that to me, I'm sorry, and I know a lot of people get sensitive about this, but that's genocide.
100%.
You are forcing people to suffer and then offering them an easy way out. When there's no end in sight of the suffering, it's like, well, you can stay and suffer for the next 20, 30, 40 years, or just head on out.
No, it's
those are
unbelievable.
the people that are going to say yes.
Of course. No, and it's, for me, it's unbelievable. And I'm a person of faith. And so it really bothers me, especially when you see, so much mental health issues, and because of the situations people are being forced into, and the quality of life and the living that is happening here in Canada for people in a first world country. It's pretty unbelievable, because you go to other countries, and I'll tell you, like, I'm in Hawaii right now, the quality of life is so much better here, and it's in so many places. So what is going on in Canada? I'm ashamed of our country right now, to the point I
Me
want
too.
to move my kids. We've already got all my kids US citizenships. I'm working on mine. Like, I don't want to be in Canada anymore, because I feel like it is becoming crazy and so heartless. We were supposed to be a multicultural melting pot where everyone loves each other, and Canadians were nice people. I don't see that anymore.
No, and I mean, it's just my opinion, but it's a lot worse in Ontario
Oh, I
than it
believe
is.
that.
Like, it is. Ontario
But
is,
BC is pretty bad too.
it is, but I have friends in BC, and at least in BC, so there's one community for sure of like spinal cord injury people that have really banded together and formed a very strong alliance with each other. And so they kind of just have that, like, that safe space within each other. In Ontario, people's mentality is very different. And one thing that I hear a lot of people say is, well, it's the same everywhere. And I'm like, no, it isn't. No, straight up, it isn't. But people will say, so me talking about, like, one day I don't want to live here. Like, I want to get out. It's better elsewhere. Da, da, and everyone's like, it's the same everywhere. I don't know what you're talking about. And it's like, actually, it's not.
I hate that response, and I feel like it's such a canned response, because even me, when I was trying to figure out what to do with my kids in this crazy modern world, and I was bringing my kids over to other kids' houses, and my kids would be greeted with this, and the kids wouldn't even look up from their phones or talk to my kids. And I said, they're like, Lisa, you're going to have to deal with it. This is just the way life is. And I said, if I have to move to the other corner of the earth to find what I'm looking for, I will go there, because I'm not accepting this reality for myself or my kids. I want my kids to be kids. I want them to grow up the way that I got to grow up as a child, and I just feel like we're putting so much on kids these days, that is too much for them to carry, and I found
Well, and
so, and I feel like you too. So I want to ask you, where's your ideal place that you would want to live?
um, somewhere warm, because
Hawaii?
the cold Hawaii. Yes, Hawaii.
They don't want us
Um,
here either.
I know, I know, I know.
So,
But I've lived in California, I've lived in Florida. Both of those are great options. Arizona is another great option. Um, somewhere that's flat is usually good. Somewhere that's warm is usually good. Somewhere that's dry, also usually good. Because, like, basically living in Canada for 6 months, 8 months out of the year, I stay home, because if
winter.
it if it's snowing, I'm not going out with my wheelchair in the snow. If it's muddy, I'm not going out with my wheelchair in the mud. If it's rain, like, I'm not going in the rain either. Also, the rain does some really crazy things to my body, so I'm just not about it. Like, I'm literally suffering half the year just to survive. Right now, it's just I'm surviving long enough until my kids are old enough to make the decision to leave the country with me. That is it. There's no way around it. My exes have been in the loop of that since forever, because I don't do winter. And so it's just, how do we survive until then? And while I would love to be able to just be quiet and live a normal-ish, or, as best, it can be a humble living. Like, I don't need anything extravagant, but I'm not even afforded that as a disabled Canadian. So
Well, I can see
if
why,
I,
with the ableism thing. Like, I didn't realize how ableist I was, like thinking about how everything was, until I had kids, because even, walking with strollers, and I'd be so annoyed. I'd be like, the whole, like, being like, how dare they not, shovel these sidewalks for me and my children, or like, going down paths that were completely inaccessible, and then trying to push through snow. And then I was like, I had Omi in the wheelchair. And I was like, how do people in wheelchairs in Canada get around? And it was such a big wake up call for me in terms of really starting to view through the lens of somebody in a wheelchair, how they're doing daily life. And everywhere I go, I'm like, how would a wheelchair get in here? How would a wheelchair get up here? You know, and I got to see it through Omi. I was one pushing her, but I really got a big dose of it and saw on a small scale what you guys have to go through on a daily basis. And Canada is one of the worst places.
The average Canadian spends 8 to 11 years of their life with one or more disability. And so if disability and accessibility and inclusion doesn't affect people today, right now, there's a very good chance that it will affect you or a loved one at some point in your lifetime. And I'm telling you right now, when that day comes, that's not going to be the day that you are at your best, at your strongest, and ready to fight and advocate.
Mm-hmm.
Hands down, because there is a huge adjustment period. And, you know, you want to be fighting this fight now, is kind of what I'm trying to really get people to believe in,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not just for those of us that are living with disabilities today, it is for the future of everyone. And one thing that is a really sensitive topic online, when I talk about white privilege and all of these things, and I say, white people are the problem. And they are.
Mm-hmm.
It's the colonizer mentality. We don't look after our own.
No,
We
we
are one of the only cultures that put our sick, our disabled, our
elderly.
elderly, we get rid of them. We
Mm-hmm.
put them where we don't have to deal with them. That, to me, is what's really wrong with humanity, is people are just disposable.
100%. I preach about that all the time, about how you put single moms in boxes, you put people with disabilities in boxes, and you know, you put the single or the seniors in boxes. And it's like we were meant to live in a village, and the whole village was collectively supposed to take care of everybody. And it also made the whole boogeyman thing go away too, because there'd be like, you know, Troy, the alcoholic down the road who maybe is a klepto. And instead of being like this boogeyman everyone's scared of, everyone knows him, you know? And we've stopped really personalizing and humanizing everybody,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
everybody's in their own little world. I'm all about like, how do we bring the village back? How do we bring back community and people looking out for each other? And we do live in one of the most individualistic, selfish societies, where it's like me and my comfort zone in my house, and we're all in our little boxes, and everyone's lonely. And it's like, well, we have a solution here, is to you know, look out for each other. And other cultures we could learn a lot from.
Yeah, no, I think that we wouldn't have as many struggles with mental health as we do if we still had the village.
100%. Going back to getting out of the country, are you allowed to leave the country? Like, with if you were able to get out of the country, would your kid's father be okay with that?
That man is trying to sink my ship faster than I can paddle. He doesn't even want to let me leave the area with my children and move to somewhere where I have proper support to care for them.
What the hell? Who do we got to call?
Sorry, but some guy who hasn't paid child support in 5 years isn't going to dictate where I can live to actually take care of myself and my kids. So
And
it's
I
kind
don't
of
think
like,
anybody would actually fight you on that either. You know, like if you just got up and left. So how do you have like, I've seen you on TikTok, on Instagram. What are your channels on there so people can follow along with your journey?
everything is under Wheelchair Wonder Woman. Wheelchair, the number one, DER woman, should be kind of wherever my name shows up in here.
And have you started a GoFundMe or anything like that where people can?
I have. I really suck at asking for help, but I have kind of come to a place where there's no getting out of this without help. Because so if it takes 6 to 8 months to get government disability support that I don't want, and it takes 91 days to get medical assistance and not be in here, don't want that either. The next best option is relocate with my kids to somewhere where I have access to the resources and supports that I need as far as personal care supports. So that way I can just get back to work and avoid it altogether. I'm not going to be able to let go easily, but in order for me to fight the fight, I need to be stable and secure. So the
Mm-hmm.
GoFundMe will help me be able to relocate with the kids and, fight for their rights as well, in family court. So it's there's a lot of moving pieces to it, but I have faith that we're going to be okay.
Well, I just knowing your spirit. I mean, I see you, and I see a lot of myself in you. I'm the kind of person that I don't like to ask for help, but when I do ask for help, it means I'm at the end of my ropes and I desperately need it, and it takes a lot to ask for it. So I can tell what kind of a person you are, like that you've been fighting this, for so long on your own. And I really hope that people that know you can band together and support you, because I mean, I don't even know you, and I want you to be here. I think that the other option is not even an option. Is it something that you would ever consider?
And so a lot of people have asked me this, right? They're like, "Oh, you're selfish. You're doing this," and it's like my rebuttal to that is that the countdown. I think it's like 21 days or 22 days. I don't know. I'm kind of not really keeping track. Even though I'm doing the countdown online, I'm not really present in that because 21 days is fine. But if I run out of support before 21 days,
Yeah.
which is more likely, the outcome is still the same. Like I can't get up and use the washroom independently. So if I can't go pee on my own, what happens? You
Right.
I get sick and I'm not here anymore. And so people should be more concerned about that and about what my children are witnessing living with that
Mm-hmm.
rather than focused on this silly MAID business because so many people are hyper fixated on, well, that's a choice. Well, I mean, yes, it's a choice. And I mean, I guess,
A
I will
strong
have it
arm
there
choice.
in case I get so sick.
Yeah.
Right. But I mean, I guess it is a good option to have if in case I get really, really deathly ill and I'm not coming back from it. It is a good option to have there. But in me speaking out, I'm saying I don't want to end up there. And I really don't think that my kids should even be having to witness what they're witnessing right now, as far as me not having enough support.
It bothers me that we have to do like a GoFundMe, and that you have to put yourself out there to try to get support. But it seems like people should be lobbying against the government and coming together and creating a movement in this community, as loudly as the trans community is doing. Match that energy and bring some real awareness, because there's so much ignorance around it, and the ableism thing too, like not knowing, what. I feel like people that are uncomfortable just tend to ignore things instead of educating themselves on it. So
Exactly. And so something that I actually thought of when I was talking to my friend in the trans community, he was saying something about parades, and I was like, everybody deserves a parade. Why don't, like, I actually think a parade or a march for the disabled community would be a good thing because we're not seen. We need to be seen.
yes.
And I think that that's a great fun step way to get people involved. But absolutely the next chapter for me after this survival round that we're playing is definitely to create a movement, to create change, and to really lobby the government to make those changes and step up and keep disabled Canadians safe because that is not what's happening right now.
So is there any kind of hub where people that want to be, help advocate or be a part of the community, or and help get a spotlight on this? Is there any kind of places where that you can send them, or an email or something where, I don't want them all coming to you, emailing you, but I'm just talking about, like, is there some kind of like a
I
support
mean,
group or?
right now, right right now, I don't have a clear way forward with that. There may be organizations in different areas. I'm not linked up with them currently right now. But writing your MP, MPP, all of that is always a good place to start. But even take it a step, back one more time and I think that everyone should do a little accessibility research of their own. Make a conscious effort to go out into your community and look at all the ways that it's inaccessible for people with disabilities, whether it be hearing impaired, visually impaired, mobility impaired, cognitively impaired, all of the above. But take a good hard look at your community and see really how you think on a whole you guys are doing. And then that'll at least give you somewhere to start with writing letters and saying, hey, listen, this isn't, I've noticed, so in the letters you can say to your member of parliament, hey, these are some things that I've noticed. Oh, give me 1 second, my back is spasming. Yeah, like you can say, these are some things that I've noticed in the community. These are some ways where, I think that we could be doing better. But Canada-wide, just point blank, the financial supports need to be hugely improved. Even things like access to healthcare. People think like, oh, just go to the hospital. Like, no, the hospital in a lot of places isn't even accessible to disabled people. And it's not always the safest place for disabled people. And a lot of people don't realize that. So there's so many different areas that need to be improved.
And layers to it. There's so many different layers.
That's exactly it. There's many layers. And so I know like I said, once I'm through this survival round, and I am able to really link up with more organizations and get to work in creating change, then I'll have more directive for people who are like, how do we help? How do we, make things different? So I encourage everyone to just kind of follow along, because I will get more and more loud and more public about things as they develop. But as for right now, I don't have like a clear way that, or a specific organization that people can just link up with and get fighting the good fight. But right now, it's discussion. We need to be having more discussions. We need to really, first and foremost, get more comfortable with disability, because so many people are just like, he, oh, that makes me kind of feel a certain way. And it's like, great, okay, I'm going to need you to put your personal feelings aside, because like this actually impacts my life.
Yeah. And you don't have to worry about other people's discomfort. That's not your burden to bear. It's like
Nope, been there, done that,
making
did
sure that
that.
everybody else is okay with your situation. I just, that's one thing that I just can't imagine having to deal with on a daily basis. And again, it's like little on such a smaller scale. Like I see it when I go with my 4 kids, like, wow, you sure got your hands full. There's always the canned comments that come with anything. But
oh yeah, you take me out with my kids and the comments are like a whole lot, like
I can't
totally
even
different.
imagine what you go through when you have your kids with you. And I just want to tell you that you're a rock star. And I know it's, again, when people tell me I'm a superhero, I'm like, I don't want to be a superhero. I want people to help me. Like you don't want to have to be a superhero, but you have carried so long. I've creeped you enough to see what a good job you've done with your kids and what a strong woman you are. And I do feel that you have such a huge voice, and you need to use it and get so loud, and people will follow. I guarantee it. You have a great energy. You've got a good sense of humor. You've got a really good, smart head on your shoulders. And I just think that you could be the leader for this movement. I really believe that with what you've got on your plate.
Well, we shall see what the future holds. But thank you. I appreciate that.